Let there be football. Feels like we're maybe getting one step closer to that. I'm Aslan Hajivandi, joined by founder and administrator of Warchant.com, Gene Williams. Use the promo code Warchant30 for 30 free days of access to the ultimate Seminoles sports source that he built from the ground up. Or you can just maybe go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube page. Hit the thumbs up like button. You like football, right? We're going to talk nothing but football. Gene, we heard that possibly Wednesday today the ACC might release some details into the 2020 season, but there was also some signs that perhaps they'd wait another week. But no, they've gone ahead, the ACC, and they've laid out a schedule, looks like.
Yeah, it was a little surprising. There were a lot of reports that came out earlier this week that the ACC was going to kind of kick the can down the road. We're going to have to wait a week or so to get all this together. But no, how about the ACC taking the forefront in this and coming out with plans for the 2020 football season? The ACC Board of Directors announced it in a press release earlier today, and a lot of interesting points on there. I guess the first is the date of it's going to start. Football will start the week of September 7th through the 12th, so that's really only a 1 week delay from where it was originally set. What's interesting is that's a Monday, so I'm guessing there could be a Monday night game in there somewhere. And, obviously, as you're showing there, if you're looking on the screen right now, you can see they have the home and away games set within that. It's a 10+1. You're going to play 10 ACC games. There are no conferences. The Coastal, the Atlantic are gone. It is one big conference, 5 home ACC games, 5 away ACC games, as you're seeing there. They've got Florida State's home and away. We do not have the dates. We don't have television information of that. But then there's also the +1. And it was interesting in the press release, they said you're allowed to do the +1 of a non-conference game, but it must be within the state of the ACC team. So that's obviously they're making sure the Clemson, South Carolina, Florida State, Louisville, and Kentucky, and then obviously Georgia Tech, those games are kept intact. It'll be interesting to see what the other ACC schools are able to do with that. And then the other big part of this release is that Notre Dame is, for all intents and purposes, a full-time ACC member in football for 2020, and they will play, like everybody else, they will play 10 non-conference games or in ACC games, and they will also compete for the ACC championship. And if they're the representative, they will go on and represent the ACC in the Orange Bowl. And along those lines, and I'm not surprised that happened, but it was interesting. The big question was, how is that money going to get divvied up? Because they, of course, have their own television network in the with NBC, and the announcement says they will split that money equally with all the members in the ACC. So that'll be a nice little revenue bump. Might not a huge bump, but $1 million or $2 million probably per school getting out of that thing. So that's nice that Notre Dame's going to kind of chip in a little bit to that. So it's an interesting thing. It's very aggressive to just push the season back 1 week to playing 11 games effectively in the regular season. So hail to the ACC, man, getting out in front of this thing and being very aggressive with their plans.
Also very aggressive with the schedule for Florida State.
Goodness.
We lose Wake Forest. We still keep Virginia. Pitt's there. North Carolina and Georgia Tech have been swapped in. A trip up to Notre Dame. So we deserve some of that NBC money. What were your first thoughts when you saw the group of games? Again, we don't know the exact dates or the sequence that they'll be played in, but we do know the opponents for Florida State for 2020 and where they'll play them.
Well, that's incredibly difficult. I mean, this is going to be tough to get bowl eligible, honestly. We'll see. We don't know yet, obviously, a lot about Florida State, but, man, they didn't do Florida State any favors. Obviously, adding a trip to Notre Dame, that's going to be incredibly difficult. That's going to be a ranked opponent right there. Obviously, you've got Clemson. And so you bring in North Carolina, who has dramatically improved. That'll be fun to have them at home this year with their quarterback. Pitt's got a great defense. They'll have them at home. We saw Virginia was a pretty decent team last year. Your buddy Satterfield, we got to travel to Louisville to play them, and that's an up-and-coming team. That's going to be difficult, obviously, going on to Miami stuff. When you look in there, you go, yeah, Georgia Tech, not very good. NC State's down. Duke, you should. You never know, but you should. But, man, really, other than that, there aren't any gimmies on there. Yeah. I mean, there's a couple toss-ups when you look at, like, Virginia and maybe Pitt, maybe those games maybe are slightly favored. I don't know. But, man, the rest of them, you might be underdogs. This might be the only time that I've been around Florida State. They may be underdogs, according to a Vegas line, more often than they're favorites this season based on this schedule, especially if you throw Florida in there.
Yeah. I never like playing the conspiracy guy in terms of, forces that might be conspiring to hold Florida State down. But, golly, that's a bit dubious that they would send Virginia down here rather than Wake Forest when Wake Forest is already a usual in-division rival. That doesn't really save anybody any traveling, sending Virginia down here. But yeah, those are those are the chips. Those are the hand that's been dealt to Florida State. I think, yeah, I mean, when you really start looking at this, I do wonder how they're going to calculate a bowl eligibility, but good grief. I mean, you look at this, I mean, that home slate alone, I mean, Georgia Tech's probably the only game you really feel pretty confident about. And then behind that, maybe I guess I would say Virginia. Pitt's always going to have a really stingy defense. I think obviously Bryce Perkins for Virginia that will be moving on. So, man, that's going to be a tough sort of thing. I mean, do you have an over-under number you would set if you were out in the desert, Gene?
Man, I don't know. You're talking that assuming they're going to do Florida at the end of the year. I assume that will change. I assume that's still going to be November 28th in Doak Campbell that Florida will end the season there. So on that 11 one, man, I don't know. So I'm just looking at it real quick. Georgia Tech a win. Maybe you split Pitt and Virginia there. In North Carolina, probably a slight underdog, I would think at this point. I don't know. So you're almost there, and I'm saying I'm going to set it at. I hate to go right down the middle, man, but for 11 games, I'm going to go 5.5.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it right there in the dead center. I think it's a 50-50. This team becomes bowl eligible. That schedule, I thought they were definitely bowl eligible based on the old schedule. Of course, you take out the Sanfords, you take out a West Virginia. I thought you were favorite. You mentioned Wake Forest, Boston College, Syracuse. You had a lot of pretty good winnable games in that old schedule that just disappeared on this one. Other than getting Georgia Tech, everything else is pretty tough.
All right, what do we assume the next move, I guess, here is for the actual conference now that they've released the schedule? I mean, I'm going to pull up some more information here that they've also released. But I mean, would you think that the news is going to come fast and furious now, or will there be another sort of waiting pattern until next week when they all get together again? And here's some of the info facts for the season that you're talking about earlier. Just the games will begin on week of September 7th to 12th. Notre Dame's going to play the 10-game schedule. They're eligible to compete. All their TV revenue for the 2020 season will be shared equally by all 15 institutions. So I don't know. I mean, it feels like every time we get some news, Gene, that there's more answers that are out there, or more questions rather pop up than give us answers. But it feels like this is the first sort of real piece of solid news that gives us answers rather than leaves us asking more questions, it seems like.
And it's very positive. I mean, it's a very positive, aggressive step by the ACC. It means they're serious about getting a football season in. There's always doubts. There's still going to be doubts, obviously, all the way up until if there is a kickoff at this point, but they're definitely shooting for it. And in answer to your other question, I think we're going to get something pretty quick on schedule. I mean, we'll see what they do in terms of, I think the next thing is, what is the schedule going to look like in terms of the dates? How are they going to separate this thing out? Because the schools need to know that for planning purposes. You can't just throw it on them at the end of August. They need to know that as soon as possible. And then I guess the next big question is, how are you going to handle fan attendance? Is there going to be fan attendance? How's that going to work out? I think there was one of the schools today, I'm trying to remember, was it Ohio State I was on, that came out today with their 20% plan about what they're going to have in that. So it's good that some of these schools are putting those out, so maybe that can be a model some of the schools can go off of. But I think, man, you better get that schedule out soon if you're going to have the fans in the stands. Man, you better get those ticket sales. You better start working on that and your other plans. So I think this is going to actually move pretty quickly the next couple of weeks to get that plan in place, because the schools have to have time to get this out and get the fans and get obviously television's a big part of this too. And television, you got to work with obviously ABC, ESPN here to get all those games set up, and obviously NBC now as well. I guess we welcome them to the fold with Notre Dame. And I'm very curious when that game is going to be at Notre Dame for Florida State, because remember, Notre Dame is coming to Doak Campbell to open the 2021 season. So I still have this weird feeling in my mind that they left that Monday open. Maybe they open the 2020 season with Florida State going to South Bend. Don't be surprised if that happens.
Again, the conspiracy theories will probably be floating out there. I mean, again, it's going to be one conference. They're not going to split this up into divisions. So the top two teams in terms of winning percentage in conference games plays the conference championship. And, man, Notre Dame, Clemson and Florida State are going to be some challenges for them, you think, historically, obviously, but then Duke, Louisville, Syracuse.
Louisville, no pushover.
Yeah, but I guess you could maybe make the argument that these are geographic.
Look at that road schedule. That's pretty darn easy, though.
Yeah. Well, I guess they're the more geographically closer teams to them. I mean, it'd been nice if they had to go play maybe Miami or have Miami come play them. Those two teams have some bad blood, obviously, but it does seem like maybe it's Clemson and Notre Dame sort of path, but we'll see if Florida State can play spoiler. But I would assume they have to make some concessions to Notre Dame. I mean, with the money and the splits and everything. I mean, Notre Dame needed a home as badly as the ACC needed them. So I guess you could say that they mutually were in the same boat. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I would assume Notre Dame wanted some concessions in terms of who they'd have to travel and play, and that's pretty favorable for them. So, them and Clemson looks like probably catbird seat for the end of it all. So
it will be interesting to see what they do, because they have that. I mean, they still had Arkansas on their slate to be played, and the SEC is obviously not canceling that. So I'm wondering if that's the September 12th game that they have. I wonder if they're going to have to cancel that game now with Arkansas, because obviously last time I checked, Arkansas is not in Indiana.
Yeah.
So right. I don't think they could pull that one off.
It'll be interesting to see who they fill that non-conference game, and obviously Florida State we expect would probably linked up with Florida, and that would be played in Doak Campbell Stadium, likely that Saturday after Thanksgiving. All right, lots to digest. Plenty more over at warchant.com. Ira, I'm sure, will be breaking things down. Gene providing some more insight, and don't forget later on tonight, myself and Michael Langston doing a recruiting chat, looking ahead to the future as well. But football one step closer as the ACC has released their blueprint for their schedule for the upcoming season. Again, hit subscribe, hit the like button, and head over to warchant.com, the ultimate Seminole sports source. Gene, thanks for your time and insight, bud.
Thank you, Aslan.